My name is David Eichhorn, and I'm a bond geek. And where that has taken me today is to this place, NISA Investment Advisors in St. Louis, Missouri, where we run, well, lo and behold, a lot of bond portfolios for big institutions. But maybe starting with a little bit of that obligatory backstory, I want to share kind of where I started my journey, and I'll skip over things like education or Wall Street or nonsense like that. But I want to start with really where I learned maybe the most, certainly the first things I learned about business, about hard work, and I think what's relevant today, intense client-customer focus. And that was here. Ted Drew's frozen custard stand in South St. Louis, Missouri. Oh, well, yeah, well, I forgot. We have the, I forgot there's a small St. Louis mafia here. So okay, so I forgot people know this. Okay, so you know it, but I'll tell everybody else about it. So I worked there in college to pay the bills, and there were a lot of bills, so I worked there a lot. And that's the hard work part. But what I really want to talk about was how they approached intense customer-centric business. So imagine the scene, right? It's a St. Louis hot, humid summer night. Honestly, there may be no other kind, frankly, in St. Louis, but lines out to the street, wrapped around the building. You know, our problem was a supply problem, not a demand problem. So working there was something akin to an athletic activity. It was 30-plus college-age kids hustling around, trying to pump this liquid white gold out the windows as quickly as possible to satisfy that enormous demand problem. So speed was everything, but never, ever, by edict of Ted, ever at the expense of quality. And I learned a lot working there, much of which I apply still today in this so-called world of high finance. And I'm going to touch on that a couple times throughout this presentation. But before I move on, I'd be remiss without pointing out the single most important event that occurred at Ted Drew's in the mid-90s was who I met. My wife now of 22 years, with whom I have 3 wonderful children, who was also working there to pay a lot of bills. So, okay, so what am I actually really going to talk today, and what I want to share today is something that I've observed over time, and Dave alluded to it. I mentioned I'm a bond geek. I am not a management guru, even using some of the management speak here today. I'm going to use kind of, it's like petting a cat the wrong way at times, but what I really want to share is certain governing dynamics of business weren't always obvious to me as the quant bond geek. But one became clear as Nissa was growing over time, and this is what I'm calling here the paradox of growth. So growth, right? We're all interested in growth in revenues, profits, clients, whatever the goal is. Admirable goal, not an at-all-cost goal, I think, in this group, which is great, but it's an admirable goal. And with growth comes things like, well, size. And that sounds pretty good. In a lot of ways it is. You get scale, you get market leadership, and those are the good versions of size. But what I found, at least in our organization, over time, that size also creates size of organization, internal size, and that breeds complexity. Importantly, what I call internal complexity. And that doesn't sound as good suddenly. And that starts to result in a sluggishness, a reactiveness, and how you can, at least how we were running our business at times. And complexity, in my opinion, kills growth. And this was the paradox that dawned on me some number of years ago, and was something that I said we need to stay on top of. And I want to share at least one thing we've done to do that. So that when I leave here, you don't think Eichhorn, he's that guy that runs the custard stand. I will give you a little bit about my day job. So Nissa is a institutional investment management firm. We manage a little over $400 billion in assets under management. But as you see here, for only about 200 clients. So you can do the math. We tend to work with really, really large asset owners throughout the world. We have 330 employees, 80 of which have an ownership stake in Nissa. So we are 100% employee owned, which is really rare in our industry and certainly at our size. This probably makes us maybe one of the top 5 largest employee-held firms, asset management firms in the world. And we think that's a distinct competitive advantage, and we really believe that. I guess that's why I'm here, right? And we've been blessed with great growth. In a pretty rocky industry of finance and asset management, this has kind of been our growth profile over time. Really, really fortunate with this. It's been great, but as I mentioned a moment ago, there's elements of growth that aren't always great, and they bring their own challenges, and that's what I want to delve into. So what I mean by the challenge is, how does this actually manifest? So I'm going to start at the beginning. How does any company start? Well, I lost, well, all right, my clicks are a little weird. Okay, it all starts, I would say, it starts with a founder, but most importantly, in my opinion, more important per se than the founder or founders, is the founder's mentality. And a quick aside here, a lot of the vernacular I'm about to use and the concepts and techniques we've gotten from Bain and Company, including this, there's a book by this title, The Founder's Mentality, which I highly recommend. I'm sure we can give links and what have you, but great, great school of thought, for lack of a better term. But let me describe, what is the founder's mentality? I'd group it in a few things. Certainly it's, what's your insurgent mission, right? What makes you decidedly different as an organization? It tends to include a second element, which is client obsessive focus. How do you have a close, tight, I would argue intimate relationship with your clients? And then lastly, and I think most importantly, an owner's mindset and how you run the organization. But that owner's mindset permeates the whole firm. Not just capital O owners, not just the 80 owners I alluded to, but how does that owner's mindset touch everybody and make sure everyone is acting as owners when they make decisions, not as agents of the firm? And that's kind of how Bain, I should say to be more accurate, identifies the founder's mentality, and it resonated with me because we at NISA, we were dripping with that early on, and it was easy. We were small, and importantly, we could run this in this kind of top-down central planning approach. And so we had a lot of growth, and growth was great. We started to head north on this graphic here, and like the last graph showed. And particularly in an industry, I'll say, that seems to be captained by folks with the acumen and risk tolerance of Edward Smith. I'm looking for smirks. Anyone? Captain of the Titanic? So in an industry like finance, we focused and we were able to achieve measured, or to use an Evergreen term, paced growth over time. But along the way, and this is what Dave was alluding to, I felt these nudges at time a little bit to the west on this graphic here, where with that, as we got bigger, we're a little less nimble, a little less innovative, and we're more reactive. And what terrified me is we'd start to follow this pattern. And it's a common pattern of business, where then you become more sluggish and more reactive. And if you get there, as opposed to where I thought we started as an organization, which was wildly innovative and close to clients, then it's inevitable you land here in the Southwest Quadrant. Because at bureaucracy, internal complexity are arch enemies of growth. You land in this corner, and you land there as a smaller and certainly less happy version of where you started. So this was concerning me, and I wanted to see, how do we address this? And so going back to my Ted Drew's example, Ted, and he really is, he's a real person, he handled this very simply. He kept the organization small. He was willing to forego growth. And he came in daily when I worked there to check things like the temperature of the hot fudge and the ripeness of the bananas. I mean, no joke, every day, and God help you if one of those was off. So that's how he handled it, and in a lot of great ways, that's how NISA handled it early on, and how I handled it, which was keep doing the equivalent of, finance equivalent of checking the temperature of the hot fudge, keeping our hands in everything, making the same decisions over time we'd always made, not really paying attention, is this sustainable as we add this many assets and this many clients? And so the question was always, can we get to this northeast ideal state where we get all the benefits of scale and size, but we remain nimble, we remain that insurgent, and we really believe we're different in how we attack the asset management industry. And so what we came up with, or we started to employ, is what we call internally, again, a Bain term, micro-battles. So there's a lot of detail here I won't go through, but the key purpose of a micro-battle is simply to rediscover, or maybe more accurately, reignite the founder's mentality throughout the firm as you're growing. And so now we adapted it because we're a weird little place and not everything fits us. And I'll tell you how we use these currently. We launched, or first we define a huge pain point or opportunity that warrants the attention I'm about to describe. Then we build a team. Maybe it's 8 to 10 people on the team. We source a couple of what I call franchise players that are the kind of key, make things happen. Now, importantly, totally flat org structure on this team, but we make sure it has some superpower in it, frankly. We assign project management expertise that act as guides and gurus to the process, and we give them, say, so that's the team. Oh, lastly on the team, and then we also assign 2 senior leaders of the firm, but importantly, not to direct, Their job is simply to break down obstacles and be a sponsor for this team. The micro-battle team is completely autonomous. And then when you identify the time frame, it's usually something like 6 to 8 weeks. This is an important one. We ask these team members to dedicate 20+ hours a week in addition to what they have to get done over this sprint. And I don't know about you, when I sprint, I'm tired. The teams are tired when they're done. But the key there is we flip the relationship. We identify the resources and we identify the time frame. We don't identify the scope of the project. That lives inside the team. And it's an amazing anecdote for scope creep. They figure out how can we best address this pain point over this period of time given what we have. And it's great bang for the buck. And it's an aggressive approach. And then lastly, we inject a couple key cultural elements inside this team of autonomy. Certainly one is a concept of fail fast. What's the hardest thing? What will make this fail? And let's attack it first while we have time to pivot. Don't wait to the end, which is a classic a failure point, and we would fall into that a lot. And the last one, and this was always an interesting one, nothing is sacred. Anything can be questioned, but as long as it's questioned with rigor, with data, and reason, not just, well, I don't like how we do it. That doesn't work. It has to be approached in a very rigorous way. So that's the concept of a micro-battle. And we had just great success. We kicked a bunch of these off. I'm going to give you one. The clock's going faster, I think, than normal. So I'm going to have one example here. How we applied it. I won't bore you with the details of what a completion engagement is. It's our most bespoke types of strategies we run for corporate defined benefit plans. High human touch, high human involvement to run these things. And the humans touching it are our most senior humans. So this is an incredible drain on some of the most senior resources. And then you get to the data. Tons of data coming in to run these every day from all disparate sources, actuaries, record keepers, clients. So it's kind of it can be a challenging and complicated business to run. And you'd say, well, that sounds like a terrible business. Well, it's a great business. We love it in a lot of ways. And we had a sense it was really taking off. And I'll steal my own thunder here. We were doing this in about 17, 18. When we attacked this micro-battle, we went on a run of 35% annual growth of mandates here. Now, that in asset management, I'm not in some of your industries. This is huge growth, right, in asset management. But we knew that over time, the complications of the complexity of this business would crush itself under its own weight in how we were running it. So we kicked off a micro-battle. Now, the way Ted handled that, always coming back to the custard shop, was he was always asked, why not franchise? Solve the supply problem with more stores. And his quote was always that franchising and growth will lead to mediocrity. Now, I'm not here to judge if that was a good or bad decision, but boy, I do admire a willingness to forego growth for quality. But in the case of these completion engagements, we really did think we can kind of have our, I guess, du jour, custard and eat it too, right? And deliver on this. And so we launched this, and the mission of the completion micro-battle was prepare us for 100 engagements in short order. Now, we were less than 50 at the time, so it seemed silly. Well, you see what happened. I'm glad we did. But importantly, the second sentence in the mission was, while delivering a better version of completion than we do today, not a watered-down version. And we identified the first failure point, that fail first, as recognition we may never be able to do that because of the reliance on the senior team. So I have a bunch of results here coming up. I won't go through these. They're all our technical, geeky bond jargon for the most part. But some of the pain points here may resonate. But I think there's one anecdote that I think transcends, maybe all our industries here. So as this business grew up over time, some of these engagements actually went back 10 years and things like that before the growth took off. As it grew up over time, we kind of stacked process on top of process, and things were injected, and probably things that could have been mothballed weren't, and this thing just grew up over time. And the completion team that was working on this micro-battle team stepped back and said, this is just an unwieldy process. So they took the time, and this was their initiative. We're going to painstakingly graph how things get done, when data comes through, how we start with that and we turn into trades and things that run these portfolios. And they went through this unbelievably, honestly, I thought, is this worth it? Time-consuming process to go through it, to identify and just sketch this out. Now, I was one of those lead-learn people, curiously, on this one. And I remember when they presented the schematic to us, and it made me giggle, honestly. I would call it, as I looked at it, this big page, it looked, I'd call it a bird's nest, but that would be insulting birds' nests and birds' nests everywhere. It was just an absolute mess of processes because no one questioned it. It worked. But also no one ever stepped back to say, is it going to continue to work when we hit some of these growth numbers that we think could happen? And that's what the micro-battle team did. They streamlined, they pull out these little key subcomponents that were the keys and simplified the process, alleviating some, this is still a high human touch arena, but alleviating some of that high human touch. So there's more results as I click through on this page. I'm not going to go through those, but I'll focus on the center column, what I call the anecdote that the micro-battles bring. Anecdote meaning the anecdote to the paradox of growth. Empowering these groups with an entirely flat structure. Some are the most senior people in the group, but they're no different than anyone else. Simplification, experimentation and figuring things out, fail fast, quickly, figure out what we need to do. Those are all true anecdotes to in my opinion, to the paradox of growth. And something for Nissa as control freaks, maybe nothing more powerful than nothing is sacred. And the one other anecdote, I won't go through, we had another micro-battle where sometimes people call your bluff. You know, you say things like nothing's sacred, but yeah, you're not really gonna get all of this. One element of our investment philosophy that I would have called previously absolutely sacrosanct was questioned. It was questioned with data, with rigor, and we've changed it. We've never looked back, and our clients have benefited amazingly ever since. But let me tell you, it was a gut check at that moment. So these were the micro-battles. As Dave said, we had to innovate yet one more time. So we were doing this 2 or 3 every 6 months, which for an organization our size seemed to be right. You're asking a lot of your employees. They love doing it, but you're going to exhaust them, so you can't do this that often. Humming along, and for once, I was like, you know what, maybe I know something about management. You know, I'm no guru, but okay, this seems to be working and what have you. And then along comes COVID. And COVID, I know I've talked to so many great people here the last couple days, means something different to everybody. What it means in the financial markets was this. The most amazing quick drop in markets that I've ever seen, maybe anyone's ever seen. Volatility's through the roof, liquidity's non-existent, truly terrifying, probably worse environment for a few weeks there than anything in the middle of the global financial crisis, and that is saying something. So in the midst of this, as terrifying as this was as an investor, 3 little words terrified me more, 3 little letters, WFH, work from home. Now, I've never been dyslexic, but I swear to this day, every time I see that acronym, I see WTF. and I guess Freudian, but you have to understand, Nissa, how we're set up, we make decisions because we sit 5 feet from each other and we're around. There's very few offices. This is how we collaborate. And we're all going to go work in our basements. It's unimaginable and terrifying to someone like me, really the whole organization. So how do we maintain our culture and deliver what we think are really excellent outcomes to our clients? So the way I did that is I kind of sent out the NISA equivalent of a bat signal. We need help. What should we do? And what came out of that was actually, let's go back to the micro-battle playbook. Admittedly, a very scaled down and different version. I can't ask people in this uncertain and anxious world to dedicate the time I just mentioned, but what we ended up doing was instead of 6 to 8 people, maybe it's 2 to 4 people. Instead of 3 to 5 groups involved, 1 or 2. Instead of weeks and weeks, maybe 2 weeks. But the key difference we changed on by the way, we changed the name to micro-battles. If you're looking for creative branding at a bond shop, you are in the wrong place. But bond people are really good with acronyms, and so we call them M2Bs. But the key element of amplifications here was we looked for grassroots idea generation. All 330 employees, shoot in your ideas, everything we're going to look at. A couple other things, I'll tell you, people got excited about something they could control in an uncontrollable world. There was enthusiasm, but importantly, everybody working from their basement, home office, it allowed collaboration. And I'm just so proud of my team and how this worked out. We were thinking, man, we'll get 15 or 20 proposals. We got 70, over 70 proposals within a couple weeks. We've implemented 47 specific changes to the organization, some little ones, some pretty meaningful. And over 40 of these have either completed or been in flight over time. And it was an enormous cultural rallying cry that, again, I think gave a little bit of salve of something people could control in an uncontrollable world. Finance is always uncontrollable. We get used to that in markets, but this was a weird world to be sure. So I think I'll leave it there, and actually getting right on time. I think These are, so that we now have a portfolio of techniques. We have the major, the micro battles proper when we have big pain points and things that we need to pivot and give autonomy and let people just tear down what we've done in the past and change it. And we have more of the brush fire approach with what we call the M2Bs. And I think those two are really going to serve us well. And I do think they've really helped us fight this paradox of growth. And I think if there's one thing I'll leave you with, we fit this to our organization. I'd be happy to chat with anyone, lunch or otherwise. We retooled it a bit because it's not a one-size-fits-all. You have to fit it for your organization. We did that, and we've been really, really thrilled with the results. So I hope sharing this helps give some thoughts and ideas, and I really appreciate everybody here today.